How do and welcome back. My name is Andrew Hancock and I'm a VMware technical architect from Yorkshire in the United Kingdom. I have worked with the VMware products since their inception in 1998, so that's 23 years I've been working with the VMware product line. Some of you may say if you cut Andy in half it reads VMware like a stick of rock from Blackpool. I've also written over 100 articles for Experts Exchange and won many other awards and accolades. I am honoured to have been accepted into the VMware vExpert program for the last 11 years and more recently a VMware vExpert Pro for the last 2. Okay, how do and welcome back. In today's short Hancock's VMware half hour, I'm going to show you how to update VMware ESXi 7.0 U2 or 7.0 update to ESXi 7.0 U2A. And we're going to do that direct from VMware. What I mean by that when I say direct from VMware, we're actually basically going to do it if your host actually has access to the internet, standalone host, no vCenter server, no lifecycle manager, and I'll cover another article about how we can update our servers using lifecycle manager in another part. This is about part 21 if you've been following the series. I'm armed with my espresso from Nespresso. Oh, by the way, other coffees are available. So I'm just going to have a sip of that and let's proceed. Okay, so you may remember if you've been following this series, we've been installing ESXi 7.0 U2 on our Dell PowerEdge R730, and there she is. There's my connection to iDRAC. You've seen me use iDRAC before in the parts previous to this, part 1 and part 2. So that's just to basically show you really that I'm actually basically running ESXi 7.0.2 and that is VM kernel release build 176.30552, which is 7.0.2. That's our server. I'm going to just quickly connect, if I can type it correctly. I'm going to connect to my host server. You would have seen me do this in part 2. If you need a refresher, then please pop back to part 2. It's just going to fail there because LastPass is going to try and shove in some credentials that aren't correct. So remember, of course, super user is root. Remember that all-important password. Okay, so there is our host server, and I don't want to update that password. Okay, so there you can see Dell DEL ESXi 7.02 176.30552. Also says there version 7.0 update 2. Currently in maintenance mode. I can just sort of quickly show you how we put that in maintenance mode. I'm just going to exit from maintenance mode. You can enter maintenance mode by using the GUI, and you can basically just say enter maintenance mode. Yes, I want to put the host in maintenance mode. That puts it into maintenance mode. Before we do any updates on the server, we need to put the host into maintenance mode. I'm just going to exit maintenance mode because I actually basically want to show you another way how we can do that. So our host server at the moment is not in maintenance mode. We're running 176.30552. All this is covered in my article that I've previously written, so if you like to follow some written material, I'll put this in the steps so that you can follow. So one of the things that we need to do is to connect to our host via SSH. Now it would look like I've already actually naughty boy, I've already obviously left this server basically with SSH enabled. That wasn't intentional, and again this has actually been covered, so you can see there disable console shell's currently enabled. I've obviously previously turned off and dismissed the warnings that I mentioned previously about leaving them warnings, so that you can actually basically see that you left it, and basically reduce your security exposure by leaving SSH running on your host server. Not something really that I'd want to recommend, but this is a lab environment. The lab environment here is completely sealed. There's no way into this lab environment from production, so I'm completely safe. But do think about leaving SSH enabled on your environment. I wouldn't recommend it. Okay, so we covered previously how to actually basically connect to your ESXi server via PuTTY. So again, using that magic password that you've remembered, I'm going to log in. Okay, now there we are at our command prompt. Now this might be a bit scary for some people because we're now at a command prompt, but you know, if you follow exactly the commands that are in my article, then you shouldn't have any issues. Now I actually like to create a duplicate session, and the reason I like to create a duplicate session is because the actual update command doesn't really give us any feedback. The only feedback that it actually basically gives us if it's successful, if it fails. Here we go. You can tell this is live because the phone's going. So what I'm going to have to do, I'm just going to have to put this on pause, and I'll be back after I basically deal with this what could be an urgent call or an urgent support call with one of our data centers down. So please bear with me while I basically pause this. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. A much longer telephone call than I suspected. Okay, so just to recap, we're connected to our ESXi 7.0 U2 or 7.0 update 2, and I can just confirm that. Okay, we covered this before. So VMware ESXi 7.0 update 2 by using the command VMware-L. As I mentioned, I actually basically like to open up 2 SSH sessions, and the reason this is because I actually basically like to tail the logs, and I'll put these commands in the steps below so that you can cut and paste them and see how they work. Now, tailing the logs basically just gives us a real-time view of actually basically what is going on in the ESX update log. So there we go. Not much is happening there at the moment. The reason I do this is because the ESX CLI command to update the host directly from the internet isn't very verbose, and it only really actually basically tells us if the update has been successful or has the update failed. So I'm actually going to cheat a little bit here, and I'm going to go back to, I'm just going to log back into that host so that we can refer to that, and we can log back into that. Okay, and I'm going to go back to my article here. Again, I'm going to put this in the steps. So a bit of pre-waffle, some prerequisites. Okay, so this command here is how we actually basically put our host into maintenance mode. And if we actually basically go back to our server here, this is obviously a connection via, this connection is, there we go. You can also basically see that that bar there indicates that we're in maintenance mode. The next step basically is to punch a hole in the firewall rule set of the ESXi host to allow us to use the HTTP client to go off and grab the update from the internet. So that's that command there. And then finally, this big long command here is basically the command that's going to do the heavy lifting to actually basically do our update from the internet, and I'm going to paste that in there. Now there we go. So I've got two SSH connections to our server, and I'm going to hit enter here, and you will actually basically start to see it download and lots of things start scrolling up the screen as our basically host basically starts getting patched, and I'm just going to let that proceed, and I'm just going to just turn off cam and turn off mic here whilst you can watch that. Okay, so I'm back. Okay, well, I actually basically did that for some shits and giggles, really, because what I actually basically wanted to show you is it fail. that has not updated our server, and the reason it's not updated our server is because the ESXi command now actually basically verifies to check that your host is compatible. And as I already know, this particular server is not actually on the hardware compatibility list, and it's to do with the processors. It doesn't like the current processors that are in this version, in this host server. And we've actually basically saw this warning before when we did the installation in part 1. It actually basically gave us exactly the same warning, CPU support warning. The CPU in this host may not be supported in future ESXi releases. Please plan accordingly. Now, it's easy. We can override this. So I'm just basically going to repeat the command exactly the same by hitting the up arrow key, if I'm actually basically in the right SSH connection. So I'm going to hit the up arrow key, and that actually basically repeats the command. And I'm actually going to tag on the end, copy and paste, and I'm just going to basically add on the end --no -hardware -warning. That basically indicates that it's going to do the upgrade, irrelevant of the CPU in this host, and I'm going to hit enter again. And as I hit enter again, we'll actually basically start to see exactly the same process before, but this time the update is actually basically going to complete successfully. But as I said to you, the ESXi command is not really very verbose. It's not really giving us an awful lot of feedback. All it's really going to do is show us at the very end, when it actually basically turns around and tells us update successful or not update successful, and obviously basically restart the server basically to apply the patch, apply the update. So again, I'm just basically going to disappear, and I'll be back. I'll speed this up in post edit because I'm sure that you don't want to watch paint dry, and I'll be back shortly. Okay, so we're done. We can eventually see in this connection down here that the update result is the update was completed successfully, that the system needs to be rebooted for the changes to be effective. We'll do that in a minute. But you can actually basically see here the vib's installed, and I have mentioned before that the vib really is a word for driver in VMware language. So you can see basically the new vibs that have been installed. And if you actually basically look at the number tagged on the end, 178673551, that basically is indicative of 7.0U2A. And you can actually basically look at the vibs removed from 176305552. That's the previous version. And obviously there's some vibs that have been skipped. Obviously what you're looking at there is not going to be like for like. That's going to be dependent on lots of things, versions of the build of the server, and also basically whether or not that you're using a custom image or what we like to call an OEM version. So your screen may look different. You can actually follow this procedure for any version of ESXi, just by basically changing the version that you actually basically want to download. And if you actually basically look carefully above, if you're interested, you may actually basically start to see things like boot bank, and here you've got stage bank, boot bank, alt bank. Basically ESXi has two boot banks, one called boot bank and one called alt boot bank. And basically you run, when you turn on your server, basically the server boots a boot bank and basically runs that version basically of ESXi. When you install or update a new version, basically that gets installed into alt boot bank. So you've got two versions, one in bank 5, one in bank 6. And when you boot the server, there is an option basically to go into recovery mode. Now I will actually basically cover recovery mode in another video for you, but that actually basically allows you to roll back your server to the previous version. You can only do it once. though. It's not like Flash on a switch or a router that basically has a primary Flash version and a standby Flash version, and it allows you to switch between the two at boot. You can't do that. It's a one-time option only. So for instance, we'll reboot the server in a minute, and when we reboot the server, if you may find you have compatibility issues with a network interface card or a storage controller card. The driver maybe doesn't interact correctly with your hardware. You may be missing a data store. You may have issues connecting to switches with negotiation, with 1 gig or 10 gig negotiation. That's often a problem with a driver. So in that particular case, that could basically render your server, certainly if it's in production, with an issue. And if, of course, you didn't have any problems when you were running the previous version of ESXi, 7.0.2, when you reboot the server, you can actually basically switch into a recovery mode that allows you basically to roll back or go back to the previous version that worked. Anyway, so our server's been updated. So we're going to go back to our host connection. I could have actually basically issued a reboot command at the but I actually basically like to go back to the GUI, and I actually basically like to right click and select. Still going to leave it in maintenance mode, and I'm still going to basically select reboot, and I'm going to select reboot the host, and that's obviously going to start to reboot the host. And I'm going to flick to our iDRAC, and basically we're going to watch that server boot. So we've restarted our server after we've applied that 7.0 U2A update using the ESXi ESXCLI command at the shell. And I'll put that command actually basically in the steps, and that's also in my written article as well. And we're currently waiting for the server to boot, and I'm actually going to put this on pause. I'm going to speed it up in a post edit, and I'll come back to you when the server has booted. So I'll be back soon. And we're back. Okay, so there we go. We can see that we've almost reached our conclusion. We've applied 7.0.2a or 7.0 U2a, which is release build 17867351, successfully to our ESXi host, which was previously running 7.0 update 2. Or 7.0.2. This is one way that you can actually basically update your ESXi host directly from the internet, directly from VMware, if your host has internet access and your firewalls are opened for HTTP. And if you have a standalone host, you have no vCenter server, you maybe have 1 or 2 hosts, this is a very quick way to do it. In parts 22, I'm going to show you another method, how we can update our ESXi host in 5 easy steps. This one's about 2 steps. Still quick, but it's a few more steps basically. We're going to basically download the patch, upload the patch to our data store, and apply the update that one. There is obviously another method. You can obviously boot from an ISO, boot from a CD-ROM. And finally, I'll show you in another part how we use vCenter Server to apply the same update to our ESXi host. Anyway, thanks very much for watching, and take care of yourselves and be safe. All the best. Bye bye.